Hello and welcome to Not a Meta Simplified for the Vortex Cup, where I sort of talk you through how I see the meta and how I picked my team. Doing it a bit earlier than usual this month because I want to get it up before I go into the showdown. And I think this month it's a very condensed meta this month anyway, so I don't think it's anything that any of this is going to come as a massive revelation to many people. But the process might do, which is what I find interesting about these videos personally. I think it's always good to see how someone else builds a team, and I like the conversations that come off them. So yeah, good to get it out early. On chatting shit, we started with a lot of Frostlass talk about how it's a Frostlass meta. I'm a big fan of Frostlass, but I dropped it quite early. And the reason I did that was because a lot of teams were quite stacked against it early on, between water types, rock types, specifically Probopass as the month has gone on, and Ninetales. So there's lots of categories there that sort of beat Frostlass. Between Dragonite giving it a hard time, between Mandibuzz giving it a hard time, between Primeape giving it a hard time, Melmetal as well. It just wasn't working, so I dropped it. I just dropped it because the range of sort of hard counters were such that they weren't restrictive to team building. Speaking of though, Primeape's hard counters are a bit more restrictive to team building. I've included Dragonite and Hypno for the sake of this graphic. They're the bigger ones in my opinion. I started off using Dragonite because I love Dragonite. I think it's great. I think dragons are good here. But one thing I found quite early on was that Primeape in the one shield can take it on, and it wasn't working nicely enough. It wasn't doing the job for me, and I really was against the idea of Hypno because I sort of saw Probopass becoming big, as people were cutting in onto the fact that it's just better than Ninetales, as I'll get into in my opinion. Between Probopass growing in popularity, between Dark types being on every team, I didn't quite fancy it. Yeah, and Dragonite's exploitable as well by Frostlass and Probopass. So, and this is the problem with Primeape. This is what makes it so good. That its hard counters are very exploitable. I haven't included water dragons, so no Pelipper, no Mantine, no Gyarados. On this, just for the reason that personally I think they're not a misuse of the water slot, but like an inefficient use of the water slot, because if your Primeape counter is weak to Galvantula, that's almost writing you off using a water type as a Frostlass counter, and I'm a big fan here of using water types here, because of it beating Frostlass and because of it beating the other Frostlass counter types, and that's why I was quite keen to use Castform and Lantern early on, but couldn't quite make those work. And of course there are some links between these guys. I think the fact that the Dragonite picks up the waters and the fires, again, that's another thing that's sort of chomping away at the fires. Primeape obviously is has a big farm on Probo. So what I'm seeing here is water types looking really strong. And at this point, Hypno looking quite good as well. but as I say, I'm not particularly sold on Hypno yet. So then I looked at Hypno counters, other than Probo Pass, because personally I'm not a fan of Probo Pass, because if you line it up wrong, you get farmed down by Primate, you lose the game. If you line it up right, you kill something, you probably still have like 50% health left. Primate can farm you down. You could still be in a really tough spot. I'm just not a fan of Probo Pass, so I was looking at other Hypno counters. Obviously, Dark types are what you want. Xylas being the king Dark type here. Like Dragonite picks up the waters and the fires again. So yeah, again another reason I don't particularly fancy Ninetales here. Frostlass beats it. Primate beats it, and the Primate beating it was what really put me off. As I say, I think dragons are really good here, and I think the Primate counters are really not bad, but hit and miss, let's say. And so what I'm looking for is to be not weak to Primate. So I don't want things that are counter weak, because I want to try and reduce my reliance on a hard Primate counter as much as possible. So I don't want counter weaknesses. Things that are typically counter weak are Steel and Ice. They of course are the dragon counters, so there's a bit of a problem there. So I sort of said to myself, I'm going to limit myself to one counter weakness, and that thing has to be the dragons. And whilst Xylas is the king dragon, as well as being the king dark, it's not as it's iffy. It's only king dragon if you've got full health. With ice types, for example, you can have a bit less health and shield and farm down. Xylas doesn't have that opportunity because it's taken super effective damage back. So I wasn't keen on Xylas being in my squad because I knew I wanted an ice type or a steel type that wasn't weak to counter. I knew I didn't like Frostlass because, well, even Frostlass sort of defeats the point of not being weak to counter anyway, because Primate beats it in the 1s and 2s. So the natural conclusion for my first pick on my team was Mandibuzz. I absolutely adore Mandibuzz. And what I think is interesting here is that other than Mandibuzz beating Hypno, being a dark type, and other than Probopass beating Mandibuzz, it has no hard matchups. Down the side of the screen, there are some sort of other picks that I think are definitely worth looking at, but perhaps not key central meta in my mind. And Mandibuzz tended to be weaker to those things, and those things are the sort of things, they're there, most of them, because, and not in the main graphic, because they're exploitable by Primate or by Frostlass. And I think the meta is developed in such a way where you don't want that, really, which is another reason I don't like Xylas. It loses to both Frostlass and Primate. But yeah, Mandibuzz, it kind of breaks up a lot of this. You know, there's a lot of RPS cores in here. There's things like Hypno, Primate, Probopass. Dragon, water, ice. Now, on the basis that a lot of the ice type is going to be Frostlass, Mandibuzz breaks up a lot of that, and I think that's really valuable. So yeah, I was really keen to run Mandibuzz. So then the second thing I picked was Primate. Early on in the cup, in practice, I was running a lot of Toxicroak, a bit of Heracross, because I thought well, as I spoke about them on chat and shit, I thought breaking up the Primate Probo core was going to be difficult, and those things did that, and they did it really well. I really like them, but what you lose by not picking Primate is, well, it's a lot. You struggle more against Mandibuzz. You lose the Frostlass matchup. Mew, you're not hitting Mew hard. Yeah, and even things like the flying types, you've not got that fast spammy Night Slash to chip away at it. So in the end, I decided that I didn't want to run one of those. I really didn't want to run one. I didn't want to run one of them with Primate, given how sort of how not RPSy, but how RPSy the Hypno matchup is with Primate. I really don't want more than one thing that's just absolutely dominated by Hypno. So there was no way I was going to run them both together. So yeah, go with Primate. As I say, you don't want to get many revelations here. And then I put in Dragonair. The reason I put in Dragonair was because I think dragons are good. As I say, I ran a lot of Dragonite early on, struggling versus Probo, was struggling versus Frostlass, obviously, and I'd sort of fallen out of love with it as a Primate counter, and I found that I was using it versus the teams that were very elemental heavy, so with things like maybe Lantern, Ninetales, Galvantula, or grass types in there, because Dragon deals with those elemental types really nicely. So I thought, if I'm doing that, I might as well, if I'm using it as a counter for those elemental types, I might as well use Dragonair, because it isn't as exploitable by Frostlass, and it has Aquatail for Probopass, which it beats Probopass in some scenarios if it's got Spark. So I thought, yeah, let's stick old Dragonair in there. Now at this point, I'm very weak to ice, specifically ice that isn't Frostlass. I'm not looking amazing versus Galvantula either. I've still only got the Dragonair, and I've still not looked at the water typing, which I think is really strong here, as mentioned. So I decided that a good fit for me would be Quagsire. Really like Quagsire. Grass is quite suppressed here by Frostlass, by Mandibuzz, by the Dragons, by Ninetales. Hypno beats up Venusaur. Primate beats up Meganium for the most part. Galvantula beats up Meganium. There's plenty that beats up the grass here. So Mudboys, while not being amazing, they sort of go unchecked sort of heavily, and I think, as I say, having a water type that beats Probo is important, because it gives you an option to beat Probo that isn't Primate, that isn't massively weak to Hypno, or that isn't massively weak to Dragonite or Flyers, and that's why I went Quagsire, between the Stone Edge to hit the Flyers and the other ice types. I prefer it to Wishcash. Yeah, and of course Stone Edge to hit Frostlass as well, which is important. I think it's a much better Frostlass check than Wishcash is. Not a hard Frostlass check. Not a hard Dugong check. Not a hard Lapras check. But it's there. It sort of does it. It's a bit like the rest of my team so far, outside of Primate. It's going to avoid a lot of hard counters, but has really good matchups itself. like Mandibuzz, for example. I like Lapras and Probopass, but they're not massively common. Yeah, they're like the biggest checks, the biggest counters. Not massively common, but it beats a lot of other stuff. Dragonair, again, biggest checks are Frostlass, not Frostlass, or Lapras. Not seeing loads of it. And yeah, so Quagsire, biggest checks are grass, not loads of grass. So I'm quite happy with this. I'm starting to notice a bit of a Mandibuzz and a bit of his Violet's weakness. I still haven't used my one counter weakness that I've allocated to myself. So I go with another water type. I go with Lapras, and I go with Shadow Lapras because it helps versus Ninetales. It helps the farm down versus the ice types, versus the dragon types, particularly Xylus and Dragonair, where it's important. It's important to do as much damage as you can because Surf is resisted, and a Dragon Pulse or a Dark Pulse is going to hurt. Surf also does a lot more to Primeape than the Primeape wants it to, and it also does a nice chunk to Probopass. So I like the Shadow on the Lapras here. Also beats Dugong pretty comfortably because of Skull Bash, which Dugong is a big problem for my team so far, outside of Primeape. So that was a nice little extra there. And then finally I tried Mew. Really liked Mew because of its versatility, because of its resistance to counter, because of the general sort of unpredictability of it. I really liked it. However, I was finding that having the team that I had, I was getting overrun by Primeape and Frostlass together, because outside of Lapras I don't have a hard Frostlass check really, and I don't have a hard Primeape check either, so I was being overrun a little bit. So in the end I did decide to go with Hypno, just because it's Primeape doesn't want to take it on. Really bulky, which can help it take on Frostlass. Helps it take on the dragons as well, which is always nice given that I've only got the Lapras as a dragon check. The only dragon it doesn't want to see is Violet, but then I've got Primeape for that, so got a way around that. Yeah, I was quite critical of Hypno in chatting shit because I thought the dark types would be massive. The dark types are massive, but so is Primeape. And having the dark type Primeape Hypno core, which is that it's got that dark fighting psychic sort of RPS triangle like Fire Water Grass. Having that I think is really nice, especially when the dark type has play back versus the fighting type. Gives you a bit more flexibility there, and it also gives you flexibility to sort of lean on one of them a little bit in a game versus an opponent if that opponent is particularly weak to either dark, psychic, or fighting. Probably best not to lean on Primeape given how squishy it is, but the sort of Hypno Mandibuzz core is pretty nice, and having options there for Probopass, which on the whole is one of the only things that breaks it properly, is great. So I'm quite happy with the team. I went with the Shadow Hypno because I think there's very little difference here between Standard and Shadow Hypno. I went with the Shadow because it can straight farm down Primeape before it gets to the second Night Slash. It doesn't live the second one if it does get it, like the Standard one does. But the only reason I went with that was because there's always that chance that the first Night Slash gets a boost, and at that point the Standard Hypno doesn't live the second one. And as small a thing as that is, that was, in my mind, the biggest differentiating factor when I looked at the matchups for Shadow versus non-Shadow. So I went for Shadow Hypno there. Quite happy with the team. I think it's a really difficult meta to team build. For. I don't think I'm overly weak to anything. I think most teams look a bit weak to Provo Pass, but I think that can be deceptive because obviously turning around bad leads is tough all the time, of course, but I feel like when I face Provo Pass teams, like if you're going to give me a bad lead and you're going to say, right, name one mon that your opponent's got in their line of 3, and you've got a bad lead, give me one mon that you want to face that you think is going to give you the best chance of turning it around. I'm picking Provo Pass all day. Its ability to be farmed by Primeape, absolutely walled by Quagsire. Yeah, it doesn't like Surfs from Lapras. Aquatail will add up from Dragonair. There's options there. There's options. Yeah, so I'm a little weak to Provo Pass. I think most teams will be, but it's not really a massive concern. Yeah, that's about it really. Interested to hear what people think. Interested to hear about how people built their teams. So yeah, best of luck for the rest of the month.